Barry Norman, welcome to Ventnor.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
The Isle of Arts Festival.
Yeah, which is the first time I've ever done this. I did a gig once several years ago on the other side of the island. I can't even now remember where it was. It wasn't very successful actually. But I came in one day, did the gig, and went out the next day, and I saw nothing of the island. This time I've been able to see much more. What I didn't realise last time was what a beautiful island it is. I mean, it really is the most gorgeous island. It's a bit like being on a perpetual roller coaster ride, because it's all up and down, isn't it? You know, I mean, I'd hate to have to walk it or cycle anywhere, God.
Yeah.
But everywhere you look, you know, the view is glorious. I'm not sure enough people realise that.
I know your pickled onions have been here before. There's a pickled onion competition, and your pickled onions have been there.
Well, I sincerely hope they won, because they had to be the best pickled onions. I don't care. They had to be the best pickled onions ever.
How do you get into pickled onions?
By chance, really. My mum used to make pickled onions from a recipe given to her by her mum, so it goes way back into the 19th century. And I liked them. I liked them very much. And then I got married. My wife liked them, and my daughters came along. They liked pickled onions. So I made them to my mum's recipe. And a few years ago, my younger daughter, who lives 100 yards down the road from us, had some mutual friends in for supper one evening. And in the course of the meal, she brought out a jar of my pickled onions, and she gave them to this couple. And John, the man, is a pickled onion aficionado. And I wasn't there at the time, but I'm told that as he bit into my pickled onion, it was like St. Paul on the road to Damascus. It was an epiphany.
Yeah.
And he said, "These are the best pickled onions I've ever tasted, and they've got to be marketed." And there they are, in supermarkets and all the best shops.
Yeah. My strongest memory of you is from the film programmes.
Yeah.
Film, what it is, 98 you finished, and then...
72 till 98.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a heck of a run, isn't it?
Yeah, they found me out in the end, you know, after 26 years. No, they didn't. I left. I didn't fall, I wasn't pushed,
Yeah.
I walked.
Right. I was researching for today, and you've been in journalism and radio and all sorts of media-related stuff.
Well, I suppose so, yeah. I mean, I co-presented the Today programme for a couple of years in the 70s. I was the first chairman of the News Quiz, and I started a programme called Going Places, which was a current affairs programme about travel and transport, which lasted for quite a few years and got us into all kinds of glorious trouble, because we upset everybody, and I reckon that's what a programme ought to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Was the style of the presentation different in those days? Because some of those shows now have become pretty confrontational.
Yeah. In the 70s, when I was doing the Today programme, the sort of John Humphrys approach would have been kind of frowned upon. So you had to do it in a more circuitous way, you know, using a stiletto rather than a cutlass.
Right. And did that get the answers? So sort of the modern day style
it pretty well did.
Attacking with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, you didn't often end up with people, you know, politicians storming out in a rage.
That was a good day.
Yeah, but they would storm out, or not storm out, they would go out looking and feeling discomforted, and that was good too.
Right. I mean, that's interesting, so many different facets to your career. And in my ignorance, I didn't realise that. But it's good to have done so many different things.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, I got made redundant by the Daily Mail in 1971, and which seemed deeply insulting at the time, although, as I say, later on I began to realise this was quite the nicest thing they ever did for me. But it seemed to me then that since I was perforce obliged to freelance as a journalist in whatever medium would take me, I thought the one advantage of this is it gives me an opportunity to find out what I can and can't do. So I tried everything that came along.
Right.
And, you know, some of it worked, some of it didn't.
Yeah. And the film thing was in the family before, and it was in the blood, was it really?
Yeah, well, my dad produced The Cruel Sea, and he directed Dunkirk and various other films. So I've been brought up with movie people all my life.
And so it's just natural, I guess. You had to create a address book, or you just spoke the language they knew?
Well, no, I got to be the show business correspondent for the Daily Mail because the post had become vacant, and the editors there assumed that I would have at least better contacts with the British film industry than anybody else on the paper, which was a reasonable guess, you know, considering my father's position. So that's how I got that job, and as a result of that, I did quite a lot of film reviewing as the deputy film critic, for several years, and I had done that on various other newspapers I'd worked for before. So, but by the time I came to actually reviewing films on television, it wasn't a new job. I knew how to review a film.
Yeah. So do you do media stuff still now? Are you still writing?
Yeah, I did a two-part radio series just before Christmas on the cinema. Last weekend. No, last night, Saturday night, I was on a programme, being interviewed on a programme. It was a tribute to Elizabeth Taylor, whom I knew rather well at one time. I still write a column every week for the Radio Times, and I do other bits and pieces of journalism. The nice thing is that by and large, I do what I feel like doing now, rather than, mind you, I always did.
What do you think of what's happening with the film industry now? There was a talk yesterday about a film director who's on the island. He's just done a film that he was sort of being frustrated by the sales process.
I think there is a danger that particularly in Hollywood, they'll either go for the very low budget film, or they'll go for the blockbuster, the big money movie. But they've always done that because Hollywood, it's essentially a business in Hollywood. I mean, they might just as well be turning up baked beans, as movies. The bottom line is the dollar.
What do you think is good about the English approach to films then, of making of them rather than watching them? Is there something that's distinctive about the English side?
I think the standard of screenwriting has got a lot better. That was, for many years, that was the one area where we were weak, because film writers were not regarded very highly. Playwrights and novelists were regarded much more highly than screenwriters. And indeed, if you think back, for many years, an awful lot of the films that were made in Britain were based on books with screenplays by people like Harold Pinter or Tom Stoppard, which are very good screenplays, but not necessarily very filmic, because these are words people rather than visual people. Yeah. In America, it's the other way around. The screenwriter is a kind of he's not a god, because he's looked down upon within Hollywood, as low man on the totem pole. But in the rest of the country, if you're a screenwriter, this is a big deal. If you look at an awful lot of Hollywood blockbusters, the script is virtually non-existent. They start with an idea. Hey, what a great idea! This is called a high concept movie. And a high concept movie really means that there's really no concept there at all. This is just an idea. And they start making that, and suddenly they realise it's run out. There's nowhere to go with this idea. Yeah. So they tack on a chase, and maybe a rape or two, and a couple of murders, and you come out and think, what was all that about? But it seems to work with a certain audience, 12 to 25-year-old audience. They go in, what they want is movement and action, and they get plenty of that. So the screenwriting became less and less important in Hollywood. Actually, less important in Hollywood for a while than here, I think.
So, okay, final question, and it's hackneyed, but I'll ask it anyway. What are your top 3 favourite films?
You'll be astonished to learn I've been asked that question before. And the answer is I don't have it.
Okay.
Top 3.
Okay.
It's impossible. I've seen comfortably more than 12,000 movies.
Wow.
And I can't possibly pick 3 or 10 or 100, even probably 1,000 out of that, and say these are the best of all time. It depends on my mood. I mean, the best, my favourite film of all time would have to be a film I could watch whatever mood I was in, and no such film exists or ever will exist.
Okay.
But it's because I hope the next one might be that film, and I keep going back to the cinema.
Okay, brilliant.
Now, there's one last thing. I was walking down the seafront in Ventnor yesterday, and I saw Mingella's ice cream stand.
Right.
And I knew Anthony very well, and I thought, as a tribute to Anthony, I should buy an ice cream from his family.
Well, they're pretty tasty too. So
and they're very, very nice indeed. Yeah. Yes. It was a sad loss. He was a very gifted guy, a very nice man too, and great tragedy. He died so young.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Not
Appreciate
at all.
that. Cheers. Thanks. Good. Thanks for that.
That's all right.
Very good.